It started as an ordinary morning for Daniel, a man who never thought much about signs or miracles. But on this particular day, as he sat down with his morning coffee, something happened that would change his life forever. What he saw in his cup was beyond explanation, and the message he received would shake him to his core. Daniel had always followed a routine: wake up, make coffee, and take a moment to gather his thoughts before the day began. But as he poured his usual cup and sat by the window, something strange caught his eye. The swirling steam rising from the cup formed what seemed to be a recognizable shape, and as he looked closer, his heart skipped a beat. There, in the dark liquid, was an image that looked unmistakably like the face of Jesus. At first, he thought it was just his imagination playing tricks on him. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and even turned the cup in different angles to see if it was just a random coincidence. But the image remained. His hands trembled as he stared, feeling a deep sense of peace mixed with overwhelming emotion. It wasn't just the image that shocked him, it was the way it seemed to radiate warmth, as if it carried a message beyond words. He quickly grabbed his phone to take a picture, but in that moment, he heard something, soft yet powerful, a voice that seemed to speak directly to his soul. It wasn't coming from the room, and it wasn't his own thoughts. It was something much greater. The voice was gentle yet commanding, filling him with an undeniable presence. It spoke of faith, of the importance of trust, and of a call to open his heart to something greater than himself. Daniel felt tears streaming down his face as he listened, unable to comprehend how something so incredible was happening right before him. The message wasn't just about belief, it was personal. It touched on the struggles he had been facing, the doubts that had been creeping into his heart, and the burdens he had been carrying in silence. It was as if the voice knew every hidden thought, every pain he had never spoken about. And in that moment, he felt something lift from his shoulders, as if an invisible weight had been removed. Overwhelmed, he fell to his knees, unable to hold back the emotions surging through him. He wasn't just hearing words, he was experiencing something beyond human understanding. The voice assured him that he was not alone, that he was loved, and that he had a purpose yet to be fulfilled. From that day forward, Daniel was not the same. He no longer went about his days feeling empty or lost. There was a renewed strength within him, an unshakable faith that gave him purpose. He began reading the Bible more, praying with deeper sincerity, and sharing his experience with those around him. People were skeptical at first. Some laughed, saying it was just his mind playing tricks on him. Others dismissed it as coincidence. But those who truly listened to him could see that something had changed in his heart. His once weary eyes now held a light that could not be ignored. He was no longer just existing, he was living with a conviction that was unshaken. More than anything, Daniel wanted others to feel the same peace and assurance that he had received. He began encouraging people to seek their own connection with God, to look beyond the ordinary, and to be open to signs that might already be in front of them. As Daniel continued to share his experience, he faced challenges that tested his faith. Not everyone was willing to believe him, and some even ridiculed him for what they called a coffee illusion. But deep inside, he knew the truth of what he had seen and heard. One day, he was invited to speak at a local church to share his testimony. Standing before a crowd, he felt nervous, but as he spoke, he saw the impact his words had on those listening. Tears filled the eyes of some, while others nodded in silent understanding. The real test came when a well-known skeptic approached him afterward and challenged him to prove that his experience was real. Daniel smiled and responded, "Faith isn't about proof, it's about trust. And when you truly seek, you will find what you're looking for." Daniel's experience didn't just change his life, it touched the lives of many others. His story spread beyond his town, reaching people who had been struggling with their own doubts and fears. He began receiving letters and messages from strangers who had their own unexplained experiences, people who had seen signs but had been too afraid to believe. His testimony encouraged them to accept their faith without fear of judgment. A local news station eventually covered his story, bringing even more attention to what had happened. Some viewers dismissed it, but others found hope in his words. It wasn't about proving anything, it was about opening hearts to the possibility that faith was real, and that signs could appear when least expected. As time passed, Daniel's faith only grew stronger. He began to understand that the vision in his coffee cup wasn't about the image itself, it was about the message behind it. It was a reminder that God speaks in ways we don't always expect, and that His presence can be felt in the most ordinary moments. He realized that miracles don't always come in grand displays. Sometimes, they come in quiet whispers, in moments of stillness, and in the simplest of signs. And most importantly, they come when the heart is open to receiving them. As Daniel shared his story, he realized that many people struggled with faith, not because they didn't believe, but because they didn't know where to look. Society had trained people to seek grand miracles, parting seas, voices from the sky, and undeniable proof. But what if signs were more subtle? What if they were present in everyday life, waiting to be noticed? He started speaking about his experience not just as a testimony, but as a lesson in awareness. He urged people to take time in silence, to observe the world around them, and to listen to their intuition. He believed that God's presence was constant, but it was up to each person to be open to it. Whether through the kindness of a stranger, an unexpected moment of peace, or even something as simple as an image in a coffee cup, divine messages were always there. His words resonated with many. People reached out to him with their own stories, times when they had felt a deep sense of reassurance during difficult moments, dreams that seemed too real to be coincidences, or moments when they heard an inner voice guiding them. Some admitted they had dismissed these experiences in the past, believing they were just tricks of the mind. But after hearing Daniel's story, they started to reconsider. Daniel encouraged them not to wait for extraordinary miracles but to accept the small, everyday signs that reminded them they were never alone. He reminded them that faith wasn't about seeking proof, it was about trust. And when one opened their heart to faith, the world around them started revealing messages they had never noticed before. As Daniel's testimony spread, it became clear that his experience wasn't just for him, it was meant for everyone. People from different backgrounds, belief systems, and personal struggles found something in his story that spoke to them. Some saw it as a religious experience, while others interpreted it as a moment of deep personal revelation. But the core message remained universal: faith is real, and divine guidance is always present. He received messages from people who had never considered themselves religious but had experienced unexplained moments of clarity, peace, or even premonitions that later came true. Others spoke about feeling a presence during their darkest times, as if someone was guiding them through unseen obstacles. These weren't just isolated stories, they were reminders that faith transcended labels and personal definitions. Daniel understood that not everyone would interpret his experience the same way. Some would believe, and others would doubt. That didn't bother him. He wasn't trying to convince skeptics or force belief onto anyone. Instead, he wanted to encourage people to be open to the possibility that they were more connected to something greater than they realized. His message wasn't about seeing Jesus in a coffee cup, it was about the deeper meaning behind it. It was about knowing that God could reach out in ways that were deeply personal, tailored to each person's life and struggles. And most importantly, it was about understanding that divine messages weren't just for prophets or saints. They were for everyone willing to listen. Daniel's life never returned to what it was before that morning. He no longer approached his days with routine indifference. Each sunrise felt like a new opportunity to grow in faith, to recognize signs, and to help others do the same. His story became more than just an unusual experience, it became a movement of awareness and spiritual connection. Some churches invited him to speak, and his testimony continued to spread. People who had lost faith found hope again. Those who had dismissed their own spiritual experiences began to accept them. Even skeptics who once ridiculed him found themselves questioning their own perspectives. But despite the growing attention, Daniel remained humble. He wasn't a preacher or a prophet, he was simply a man who had experienced something extraordinary and wanted to share it. He continued to live his life with a newfound sense of purpose, accepting each day as an opportunity to strengthen his faith and help others do the same. His story reminded people that signs of God's presence weren't reserved for ancient scriptures or religious figures, they were happening now, in everyday moments, to ordinary people. It was a matter of being open to them, of listening with the heart instead of the mind. And for Daniel, that was the greatest revelation of all. Daniel's story is a powerful reminder that faith can reveal itself in the most unexpected ways. Whether through a vision, a feeling, or even something as simple as a cup of coffee, divine messages are always there for those willing to receive them. If his testimony resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible stories that prove faith is alive and well in our world today.